Conservation entails a looking back to prevent what may be lost. Restoration envisages a looking forward to what may be gained. When deserts and wetlands and savanna grasslands and rainforests are damaged or destroyed, one may never be able to recover everything they had in their undiminished states. Can ecological restoration then help attain a new flourishing and regain complexity, diversity, and beauty through intelligent tinkering by people who care for the land? Can we transform landscapes of conflict between people and wildlife, wrought by relationships gone awry, into landscapes of coexistence? The first step, as Aldo Leopold wrote, is to keep all the pieces: people, wildlife, forests, plantations, rivers. No country offers greater opportunities for this, perhaps, than India. In India, one can still see people living in close contact with nature and myriad wildlife species in the city, the country, and the wild. The second step is to rekindle relationships between people and place, between people and the rest of nature. This requires nurturing a land ethic, perhaps one constituted as Leopold described. All ethics so far evolved rest upon a single premise, that the individual is a member of a community of interdependent parts. The land ethic simply enlarges the boundaries of the community to include soils, waters, plants and animals, or collectively the land. Thanks.
Thank you. So we've mentioned it quite a few times here today, but I'm just reminded of a word. You said it's literally a backyard. So what are we talking about? Which place is this? What is it called? What is its nature? What is its status? And what is its significance to the ecology of this country and possibly to the world?
Yeah, thank you for that question, because I think it is really apt that we are following Mr. Kali Prakash. He dropped the keywords called the Western Ghats. And I think people from Pollachi and around here are extremely fortunate to be in the lap of the Western Ghats, the image of which you can see behind. It's, it's this long chain of mountains starting from Gujarat up to Kanyakumari, running parallel to the west coast of India. And it is globally renowned as a World Heritage Site, and the reason for it being that it supports a huge amount of biodiversity. It is where most of our rivers, which supply to the, which supports the life in the plains in the peninsular India. It is also a place where humans have thrived and lived for millions of years. And this is the place that is very special, and it is also a place that, despite humans having been here, a lot of biodiversity continues to exist. And the place where we are working is the Anamalai. That's the picture you have there, and aptly it is named after the elephants. And the Anamalai supports a very large population of wild Asian elephants. We also support a huge population of the Nilgiri tahr, which is the state animal of Tamil Nadu, and many, many other endemic species of frogs and snakes and mammals and plants also. That's where we work.
Right. So, what is really the impact of an ecological degradation or a destructive event in an ecosystem like the Anamalais? What is its impact on the local life, both human and others, and of the larger ecology of the planet?
Yeah, very important question. Again, connects to what the previous speaker was saying, about how today we are at a time when human impacts have crossed certain boundaries. We are having an enormous impact on the rest of nature. We are also a part of nature, but our impact on the rest of nature is substantial. And I'll latch on to one word that you just used. You said event. We often see degradation as an event, but actually degradation is not so much an event as a process. Often what is most apparent to us is a particular event. Like, for instance, you cut a forest to create a mine, or you establish a road to cut through forest or to expand a road, or you submerge large areas of an ecosystem underwater, to create a dam. Those are events. Certainly they have an immediate impact, but it is the process by which they continue to have impact on the ecosystem over weeks and months and years that leads to degradation. And the degradation can result in loss of species from the ecosystem. And if you lose certain crucial species, what we call keystone species, it has cascading effects on the rest of the ecosystem. It can also lead to loss of services to people. For instance, a lot of, like Divya just mentioned, most of our rivers originate from these mountains in the Western Ghats. And degradation often results in a loss of the water services, the hydrological services. You get less water, you get less stream flow, particularly in the dry season, and it can have a huge impact. So we need to think about this as a process and also draw the connections that it's not just damage occurring on nature, but how that also feeds back to us and implicates us in it.
So I don't think anybody would be surprised to know that some of our biodiversity is undergoing degradation. So I think we have a very popular solution, which is plant as many trees as we can. Afforestation is our resort that we can rely on to restore some of our biodiversity.
Yeah.
So that's an approach that's widely undertaken and accepted. So what's wrong with that?
So we do recognize the fact that planting trees is a very, very noble action. And it is true that a lot of us are probably dependent on trees, but it's not just trees, it's also plants. So what is right now happening is that we do not think that just planting trees will remedy all the issues that we have. I mean, the solutions are, the problems are complex, but the solution is simple. And when it comes to ecological restoration, I don't think that is how we are going to see it. Because, that's how people are treating it. You plant a tree and then most of our, climate crisis is addressed. But what is important is that an ecological restoration would mean restoring the ecological functions, ecological diversity, and not just creating monocultures in order to mitigate the climate impacts. So, do you want to add to it?
Yeah, I think if you look at tree planting, more than what a lot of us do for tree planting, one of the largest efforts in the country is something called compensatory afforestation. And compensatory afforestation is a response that is implemented by the government. So whenever there is a project that destroys an ecosystem, people are supposed to compensate for the damage by planting trees elsewhere. And if you look at what has emerged in recent years is that a large fraction of what is carried out in the name of tree planting or compensatory afforestation uses just 1 to 5 species. And a forest cannot be made by 1 to 5 species. It requires a high diversity of species. It requires appropriate species to be used. And very often these are planted in the wrong ecosystems. In ecosystems such as grasslands and deserts, which have their own unique fauna. You should not be planting trees in such areas at all. So you can actually cause damage to these ecosystems, reduce the water table, and have many consequences if you plant the wrong trees in the wrong place. So whenever you think of afforestation or tree planting, it's good to ask the question, am I planting the right species in the right place, in the right season, for the right reason? If your answer is no on any of those, then you should rethink and see what would be a better approach.
Right. That actually sounds like a lot of bad news because, like you said, many people have taken it up as a noble cause. A lot of civic action we see from the public. People volunteer time and effort to plant trees many of these projects are often at a large scale. And as you said, even state policy seems to support that kind of an effort. So what I'm seeing here is a trend that we often see when we sit with a researcher on any discipline and we speak with them. We see that the right thing to do, or rather the appropriate thing to do, is always not the popular thing to do, or in fact the more unpopular thing to do. So, this gap between the appropriate and the popular, the appropriate and probably also the easier. So how do we bridge this gap? What do we do basically?
So it's a difficult one, and you're also right in saying that part of the fault lies with researchers like us, in the sense that we have not done enough to communicate to the wider world as to what would be appropriate actions to take and how people can engage in such activities. And one of the cardinal steps that people can do and which will make a big difference is to save what is already there first. Like, around Pollachi recently, people came forward in large numbers to protect the tamarind trees that are along the roads. This is not so much a natural ecosystem, but it's still very valuable. These are decades and centuries old trees along heritage roads. And working to protect what already exists in such places can often have much better consequences than trying to plant trees to and so on. And also we shouldn't think of it again as an event. It's a process. It's not just planting the tree, but also what comes after. How do we engage? How do we stay engaged with that issue? How do we follow up to make sure that what we have put has survived? How do we work together as a community to achieve that? And so on is very important. I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, I think everybody can contribute their bit to restoring nature, but I think that also means that we put in a little more effort to learn what it is, what our goal is going to be, what it is that we want to restore. Like, like for example, we work in the rainforest, and it is known for its diversity, it is known for its beauty. But as ecologists, we see beauty in every other natural ecosystem as well. The grasslands that you see in the plains here, which also support a unique set of birds and mammals and trees and grasses, etc. So I think it is important for people to find the beauty in the natural ecosystem that is closest to them and try to restore that.
So I think in order to give a clear picture of what this really looks like, so we're talking about restoration, what's wrong with afforestation done at scale and all of this. So just to put all of this in context, I think what would be best is if you speak about your own work in the Anamalais, restoring the rainforests. That would be helpful at this point, I think.
Yeah, I'll go with that. So we've been working in the Anamalais, based out of Valparai, and most of you might be aware that Valparai is a tea district, so tea growing district. And however, there are these small patches of forest within these plantations which are in various state of degradation. But they are rainforests, they are erstwhile rainforests, and what we are trying to do is try to bring them back. So for the last 25 years, we've been based in Valparai and trying to restore the rainforests over there. And the reason that we're trying to restore them is that we believe that every small patch of forest, if they are restored, can support a lot of biodiversity and help in conservation, as well as provide some services for the people living on that land. And basically right now you can see a picture of our team, so it is not just us, it is a whole team of people, many students, many local people, many tribal people who help us with this work. Yeah.
And
just to give you a brief, over the last 25 years, we've reforested about 100 hectares, which is really not much, across about 35 forest patches. But overall, these forest patches could contribute to about 1,000 hectares in this landscape. And I think this is also helping us reduce some of the conflict we see with wildlife, and definitely conserving a lot of endemic species in the Anamalais.
So since we're talking about restoration and 100 hectares, of land restored. So from the experience, what are you able to say? How much of the damage that has already been done to these ecosystems can be undone through the efforts such as these?
One of the things that we've learned in our over 2 decades of experience is that a forest or a natural ecosystem, once destroyed, cannot be recreated. So with our best efforts, with probably our best understanding, we have been able to recover structurally about 50% of what has been lost. And there are many taxa or groups of both plants and animals which have never recovered in this forest over 25 years. And we should also keep in mind that most of these ecosystems, again, have evolved over millions of years, and one cannot expect it to recover within a small period of 25 to 50 years. But what really worries us is that will these forests have the time to recover? We do know that if they are protected and if we continue to put in the effort they could, but does the planet Earth have that time under the current conditions, the way we are using the planet?
So I think in that question, I was fishing for some optimism. Since afforestation, we've thrown that out of the window, sort of. But coming back, you mentioned that there's a lot of stakeholders that's involved in this process. So from your own experience, so how have all these stakeholders contributed? What more could be done from the part of all of these stakeholders? So that I notice here there are researchers, there's the state, then there's the local community, then there is plantation owners, and then there's the larger public. So what can these stakeholders contribute?
So, this partly also answers your previous question. So is there a way for the researchers to communicate to a person, an individual, a citizen? And that's why we've started this alliance called Ecological Restoration Alliance. So we do understand that people who've spent a lot of time with their land or with a forest have a lot to share, a lot of knowledge that can bring a community together. And we need to do that. Again, like the previous speaker, we think that we can bring about a change, a sizable change, if we work as a community. And keeping in mind that while we need to do some things actively, we also probably need to hold back and not do some things. So it's better not to do anything at all than do something wrong. And I think to do something right, alliances like this or a community like this can come together and share their knowledge and make sure that we are all pulling towards a positive outcome, positive changes in our landscapes.
And I can just add to that. I think that's where there's a note of optimism, because unlike in many other cases in conservation where you say humans are having a certain negative impact on the rest of nature, in restoration it really requires humans to participate and people to participate across all kinds of stakeholder groups like you just named. Even our small project requires the help of so many people to establish, and as we have documented in that Ecological Restoration Alliance, there are now dozens and dozens of these kinds of efforts mushrooming all across the country, where people are trying to take up areas that have been degraded in the past and trying to recover and restore them. So while the point that Divya made is very important, that is that you can't take an intact or relatively undisturbed ecosystem and destroy it thinking that I can always restore it. You can go to areas that have been damaged or degraded in the past for whatever reason and bring them back. So that's the photo that we wanted to show you earlier. That's one of the sites that had been logged and subject to a lot of degradation in the past. And you can see that in a matter of about 14 years, how much the forest has recovered. And today we see animals like the Nilgiri langur and the great hornbills visiting these forest patches. And that brings us hope that certain degraded areas can be brought back, but we should not be so, sanguine about it that we can go ahead and destroy everything or anything. thinking that we can compensate for it somewhere else through restoration. That kind of, that's the caution that we should keep in mind.
Right. So I think there's nobody better than yourself to state the kind of time and knowledge intensity that it takes to carefully to undertake a restoration such as the one that you have undertaken. So, so this sort of connects to an earlier question, which is how do we make the appropriate way popular? Right? So when the appropriate way is so time and knowledge intensive, how do we achieve scale with our efforts? Because we understand that a lot of our biodiversity needs help and needs some efforts to restore. So how do we achieve that sort of a scale?
Once again, talking as individual, I think individuals can make a lot of difference. I think there is land sharing and land sparing. So whether you have an acre of land or hundreds of acres of land, you can spare some land where nature can flourish and recover over time. But I think there are also, the state, the policies that can bring about the difference. And
yeah, like I was saying about compensatory afforestation and so on. So we can also influence governments, we can influence the forest department and others, and we need to engage with that because they are one stakeholder group that is having a very large impact on very large areas of land. I'll just give you an example of how important and how significant this is. We have an example of a project that's coming up now in the Nicobar Islands, right? It's a very large project. It's a transshipment port. There is going to be an airport. There's going to be a huge township. And this is an area which has indigenous tribal communities who are very vulnerable, and nearly 130 square kilometers of pretty much intact forest, which is full of endemic and endangered species, is going to be destroyed for this project. And for that, the government now plans to do a compensatory effort believe it or not, in Haryana. Okay. Now, Haryana has nothing to do with Nicobar Islands in terms of ecosystems, so this idea that we can do whatever damage we want and compensate for it elsewhere has taken a deep root among our policy makers, and we need to question that, because not only are we losing something very valuable in one place, but by applying a wrong method in a completely different places, you might actually be doing double the damage. So I think if we really want to do scale, these are the two places. One is all of us as a community doing what we can, because each group by itself can't do a lot, but all of us together can achieve scale. But people who are already working or having impacts at scale, we need to reorient their actions as well.
Right. So we are towards the end of this conversation. So this is a question to Shankar.
Yeah.
Are you a writer first or a wildlife scientist first?
Nowadays, I introduce myself as a writer first.
Okay. So I think, so many of us don't live in the forests, and there's a certain attraction that forests offer, woods offer. So should many of us probably consider careers in wildlife? What has been your experience working in the woods all these years?
I think it would be wonderful if more people got into this field, got interested in this field. And I think the way one can contribute depends on their own passion. While you can spend time, endless amounts of time in the forest, and it is very motivating, but it is also quite tough. So I think in order to contribute towards nature conservation, you don't have to be always in the woods, but it is an option that you have. And people who can, who have probably the temperament, the adventurous streak in them, the ability to slightly rough it out, face the leeches and the ticks and stuff, I think they will enjoy it. But I think everybody can contribute in different ways towards nature conservation, and it is not necessary everybody has to be in the woods.
Right.
Yeah, and I think today we have many more options for careers in conservation, so maybe many of the school Children who are here will one day become conservationists and so on. But like Divya was saying, it's not necessary for everyone to become career conservationists. But I think there is value in everyone making space and time for nature in their lives, in whatever form suits them. Making some space for nature and making some time for nature is good for us, and it's also going to be good for nature as well.
Right. I think that's an optimistic tone to leave the audience with. Thank you very much for that. Shankar and Divya, thank you very much for your time and for your insights. I hope there's a whole another generation of people who are willing to take forward your work in a manner that's appropriate for nature and important for human beings. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.